Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. And when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41.
The writer of the famous nursery rhyme that wrongly accuses Lizzie Borden of parricide was a bit sensational in retelling the tragic tale that occurred at 92 2nd Street in Fall River, Massachusetts. The killer indeed used a hatchet, but clobbered Abby Borden just 19 times and finished off Andrew Borden in 12. The year was 1892, and it was one of the hottest summers on record in the New England town. Judging by his miserly lifestyle, you would never know that Andrew Borden was one of Fall River's wealthiest men. He rose from the dregs of poverty with successful endeavours in farming, industry, banking, and even undertaking. The house at 92 2nd Street had been the Borden home since 1871. Despite his immense wealth, Andrew refused to have the house updated with modern plumbing, electricity, or even gas lighting. Furnishings were threadbare and simple, and rooms were lit only with kerosene lamps. Andrew, however, preferred to sit in the dark. In 1845, Andrew had married Sarah Morse, but when Lizzie was just 2, Sarah died. Years later, Andrew married Abby Durfee, whom Lizzie and her sister Emma grew to resent. Eventually, the sisters referred to her as Mrs. Borden, and believed their father was planning to rewrite his will to favour her over them. Lizzie dreamt of a lifestyle befitting a high society woman. Her father gave her $4 a week, which certainly did not meet her needs, so she turned to chronic shoplifting in order to acquire things she couldn't buy. Because of Andrew's stature, local shopkeepers, well aware of Lizzie's sticky fingers, kept a running tab, which he paid monthly. On August the 2nd, Andrew, Abby and the Borden domestic, Maggie, had become violently ill. Lizzie claimed to be sick as well, but did not mirror the remarkable symptoms of the others. She had visited a family friend that evening, Alice Russell, and confided that she feared someone was trying to poison them. On August the 3rd, Abby called Dr. Seabury Bowen, who diagnosed common food poisoning. They'd been eating from the same piece of mutton for days, and the refrigeration in the kitchen was quite inadequate. The night of August 3rd, Lizzie's uncle, John Morse, had come to the home to discuss the Borden family farm. The possibility of losing this property to Abby in Andrew's will consumed Lizzie, and although the reason for Morse's visit has never been confirmed, it is believed that Lizzie was convinced that's why he'd come. When she returned home that evening, she marched straight upstairs to her bedroom without acknowledging Andrew, Abby, or her Uncle John. Sometime around 9:15 the following morning, Abby made the bed in the upstairs guest room where John Morse had slept the previous night. An assailant entered the room with a hatchet and chopped at Abby's head and back, killing her instantly. Maggie washed windows outside and chatted over the fence with the neighbour's maid, unaware of what went on. Over an hour later, at 10:40, Andrew returned home from work. The side door he usually entered was locked from the inside. Maggie, now cleaning inside, rushed to let him in. As he groused at her over the locked door, Lizzie stood at the top of the steps looking down at them and laughed. He asked Lizzie where Abby had gone, and she responded that Abby had left to care for a sick friend. Andrew reclined on the couch around 11 o'clock. Lizzie told Maggie that she ought to go downtown to the yard goods sale. Maggie, still a bit ill, told Lizzie she would go upstairs for a rest instead. But within several minutes after Maggie retreated to her hot attic bedroom, Lizzie began yelling for her to go get Dr. Bowen. Someone had killed her father. By 11:15, Dr. Bowen had arrived. Maggie suggested someone find Abby, but Lizzie remarked that she'd heard Abby come home and go upstairs. As Maggie and the Bordens' neighbour, Mrs. Churchill, fearfully climbed the steps to check on Mrs. Borden, they reached the exact spot where Lizzie had laughed at her father just half an hour earlier and could see through the open doorway the corpse of Mrs. Borden, frozen in a pool of coagulated blood. City Marshal Philip Harrington jumped into action and was at the residence by 12:20. He began his line of questioning with Lizzie, who claimed she'd been in the loft of the barn out back for about 20 minutes that morning, which seemed ludicrous to Harrington given the intense heat of the day. Lizzie's answers were riddled with red flags, but their discussion was halted by crowds of onlookers congregating in front of the house. Emma soon returned home after being in a neighbouring town for the past week. The following day, Emma and Lizzie offered a $5,000 reward, and they spent that night in the home while the two naked corpses lay downstairs covered by sheets. As the bodies were removed from the house and carted down the street to Oak Grove Cemetery the following morning, between 3,000 and 4,000 people packed the streets. Most of Fall River sided with Lizzie, but the newspapers, however, were not so kind, and the police continued to focus their investigation on her as the likely suspect. On August the 9th, District Attorney Hosea Knowlton summoned Lizzie to testify at a secret inquest. Lizzie's testimony amounted to a web of contradictions, including what she had seen, heard, said, and where she had been. In summary, the inquest led to her arrest. The press condemned her as guilty until proven innocent on a daily basis, printing unbelievable speculations. A jury of 12 men was chosen, and the trial lasted for 15 days. The jury deliberated for 10 minutes and returned a verdict of not guilty. Over 2,000 people celebrated while bands played and crowds sang. Lizzie had left her home accused of parricide, but returned a heroine. She remained in Fall River in a mansion on the hill until her death in 1927 at the age of 68.